Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. It is session number 121 of Exploring the Lord of the Rings tonight, and tonight is going to be our last session on the Eärendil poem. Not that we're never going to allude to it again, but we are going to complete our discussion of the Eärendil poem tonight. And it's going to be kind of fun. So, JJ, it is a little past lucky episode 13, but I can't really possibly follow up that act. JJ is referring to my son's stream earlier today. He did the 13th episode of his Pokemon stream this afternoon, in which he accomplished a feat I've never seen before, which is that he sang continuously for 50 minutes, almost his entire hour. He started a random narrative song, extemporaneous narrative song, 10 minutes into his stream, and kept it up the whole time with like percussion and dance moves and everything. It was something. It was something. I was cracking up. In fact, I was, it was great. I strongly recommend episode 13 of the Pokemon Discovery Project. It was a particularly excellent one. Anyway, so no, that is not what is going to be happening tonight. I'm only going to be talking about a song and not actually singing it. But before we begin, a couple quick announcements. First, I wanted to mention that we have a new special, an Anytime Audit special running right now, which is... and I think my stream title, I forgot to change my stream title from my son's stream as well, so there we go. Oh well, I'll fix it later. Sorry about that. But anyway, sorry, as I was saying, we're doing a special on a course by Diminutive called Folkloric Transformations. It is a very seasonal course. It's a course on sort of the roots of like vampire stories and ghost stories and folklore and how those were transformed into novels and into films as well. So really, really interesting course. And of course, everything Diminutive does is brilliant, as many of you I'm sure know. And that was really a wonderful class. So anyway, I strongly recommend that. As I said, that's on special, $75 for enrollment in that, for the asynchronous enrollment in that course between now and the first week of November, I believe. So go to signumuniversity.org and you will see a link to that on the homepage. Also, the next Mythgard Academy class is going to begin. So we just completed Sauron Defeated last Wednesday. So we're done with Sauron Defeated. We've now done the first 9 volumes of the history of Middle-earth over the last several years in the Mythgard Academy. And of course, as many of you know, we intersperse Tolkien books with... Okay, it's not officially an interspersing of Tolkien books, but we've got a lot of Tolkien fans in the Mythgard Academy. So the technical rule is that we're not allowed to do 2 books by the same author in a row. That's the rule that we set many years ago. And it's really been like, what it means is that we don't do Tolkien more than every other book. But we've reliably done a Tolkien book every other book for the whole history of the Mythgard Academy so far. And we've been going through detailed studies of the entire history of Middle-earth series, which is, oh man, I've learned so much in our close studies. There's nothing like going through with the Mythgard Academy chapter by chapter to really get a really good view of sort of Tolkien's whole literary life kind of unfolding. It's fantastic. If you have missed those and you would like to go back and check those out, they're all available for free on our YouTube channel. That's Signum University's YouTube channel. Go to our playlists. There's a Mythgard Academy playlist with every single course that we've done. There's like hundreds of hours of Mythgard Academy there. It's pretty cool. However, thank you, Druid's Fire, for updating the title. Appreciate that. But anyhow, so okay. So we're our next book, of course, is going to be Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. We are going to be getting this on November 6th. So Wednesday, November 6th, Is that the 6th? Or is that the 5th? Anyway, the Wednesday, the first Wednesday of November is when we're starting this, and that's going to be great. So I hope you will join me for that on the 6th of November, probably. And it is the 6th of November. I figured it was the 6th of November. So yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. I haven't read or discussed this book in several years, so since I think 2012. So I'm excited to dig back into that one. Okay, and we also have Baymut coming up. The date has been confirmed. We should have a registration link open by the end of the week this week. So definitely be on the lookout for that. We're going to be reading. Yes, this reading schedule for Earthsea will be coming soon. Fourth Dauntless. It's on my list of things I need to do, and I keep getting reminded that I need to do that. So don't worry, I'm not going to forget, and that will happen soon. But anyway, okay. So yeah, Baymut in the San Francisco Bay Area is happening on the 23rd of November. The date has been confirmed. As I said, the registration link should be out soon. So I hope that those of you who are there in Central California, in the Bay Area, will be able to join me for that. That's going to be great fun. Baymut was a wonderful event last year, and I'm really looking forward to getting back out there this year for my second visit to the Bay Area. For our second annual Baymut. So I hope that to be able to see many of you there. Good. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about. Okay, so you'll remember that I've been saying throughout our fundraising campaign, which came to an end on Saturday, throughout our fundraising campaign, I've been saying we're going to do a drawing, right? Remember, I've been saying if you're a donor and you want to enter in the drawing, we're doing a drawing to sort of celebrate Exploring the Lord of the Rings fans, and that if you wanted to enter that, all you had to do was send an email to donate@signumu.org and enter that. So you may have, and then I've been saying that I was going to draw the winners during the campaign finale, which was on Saturday. And if you attended the campaign finale on Saturday, you might have noticed that I neglected to do that. There are two reasons why I neglected to do that. One reason is that I was getting really sleepy and completely forgot. But the second reason that I did that was more cunning and calculated than that. And that is, during the course of last week, it had really come to my attention that there had been a lag in the release of the podcast episodes, which covered like kind of the entire fundraising campaign when I was announcing that. And one of the purposes of doing that drawing is not to include only the people who attend live, which is wonderful, and I love you all. But of course, I also love all of you who listen asynchronously and don't get a chance to attend live, largely for reasons not at all your fault. So I wanted to make sure. So basically, it was kind of coming to my attention that we were coming up on the drawing, and a lot of the people who listened through the podcast feed hadn't even gotten the chance to even like hear that the drawings were happening. So I decided to postpone them a little bit. So I'm gonna do the drawing in class on November 5th when we come back. So we're going to be off next week, and then we'll be back November 5th, and I'll draw the winners there. So that means, if you are listening to this, if you are listening to this asynchronously, there is still time until November 5th, 2019. That's when I'll do the drawing. So again, all that you have to do, it's very super simple. If you are if you've made a donation, or if you have an ongoing monthly donation to Signum University, just of any size, doesn't matter, just send an email to donate@signumu.org and mention that you want to be entered into the Exploring the Lord of the Rings drawing, and we will do that. And of course, this goes for the current those of you who are here live as well. You get another chance to enter. So anyway, that is the plan. Yes, exactly, Matt. It was a cunning plan. I think a cunning plan is exactly what it was. I knew better than I knew myself, I think, was better than my final plan was better than my initial plan. So anyway, that is in fact how things are working. Okay. Are you ready? Are you ready for some more poetry? Because tonight we're going to do some more poetry. So let's jump right to it. So, the Eärendil poem. Yeah, Mad Violence, exactly. I know that the 5 episodes all got released at the same time, and I apologize for that. There was some technical problems that we've been having, and we've sort of ironed them out. In fact, we're actually making a big kind of behind-the-scenes change in the podcast, which should be invisible mostly, I think, to most everybody. But still, we've been having some issues, which we're ironing out. So, anyhow, okay, so let's get to errantry. So you've heard me mention several times that it's rather remarkable. As remarkable as Bilbo's poem is, and where we were getting at the end of that poem last time, and I hope you guys didn't feel like I was being too stubborn in trying to push, but the pushing back against our expectations about our applying the things that we know to that poem, I was really I was kind of urgent with that and persistent with that last time, because I think it's especially important here, because, and part of this is that part of it is that I was, one of the things, they're always, exploring the Lord of the Rings is all about, like, for me, it's been all about, like, kind of discovering things for the first time. And for me, the primary thing that I was really seeing for the first time as we were studying through the Eärendil poem together was I had never really fully perceived Bilbo's angle on that poem before, because I'd always done what so many of you were wanting to do last time. That is, fill in the blanks, right? Like every time I'd read the poem before, I was like, the Eärendil story, the Eärendil story, the Eärendil story, right? And I was, when I got to that line about, Bilbo having the cheek to make verses about Eärendil in the House of Elrond, I always understood that as merely like, because it's a big deal, right? So it's like setting yourself this like massive challenge, like, can you rise to the occasion, of being able to sing verses of Eärendil that sort of like praise him highly enough to fit the House of Elrond, was kind of always how I'd understood that, right? But the more we came to discuss it, the more I realized that it's way cheekier than that, right? And if we really pay attention, not to what we know about the story, but to what's said, right? To what the emphasis, what is the narrative that the story is actually giving us? What is the angle on Eärendil that the poem is insisting, is bringing to us, or really is leading us to confront, right? We can see it's this, as soon as you start noticing that, you begin to notice things, as we were doing, especially over the last 2 weeks, like how Eärendil's deeds are never actually mentioned. Like what he does, what he accomplishes, never comes into the poem, right? And the consequences of his actions are never talked about. What was the effect on Middle-earth, right? What happened as a consequence? What? No reference to his mission, no reference to the War of Wrath, no reference to hope, no hope at all, no references to hope of any kind, right? And when yes, of course we can fill all that stuff in, right? But if we're doing that, if we are hearing him called the Flammifer of Westerness, and to bear his shining lamp afar, the Flammifer of Westerness, if when we read those lines, we're thinking about Gil Estel, the star of high hope, right? We're missing the point, Bilbo's point, anyway, because he doesn't mention that. That's not what he's talking about. So anyway, I felt a little like crotchety and stubborn last time. Like I had to constantly dig in my heels and resist the direction that people wanted to go. But this is not me apologizing. This is me explaining why I was doing that, because I'm totally not sorry that I did that. but I am wanting to kind of contextualize a little bit. So anyway, this poem is amazing for all of those reasons, right? But this poem is even more amazing when you put it in the context outside of the story, outside of the narrative of The Lord of the Rings, of where it came from. And I bring this up in the context of The Lord of the Rings. In some ways, of course, this is kind of not exactly relevant to The Lord of the Rings, but I bring it up because I think, to me, it shines one final, like a spotlight from one more angle on this question of, what is this poem, right? What is this poem that Bilbo is making? What is Bilbo's angle on this poem? And when we see how the poem gets here, right? It, I think, helps us to understand that a little bit. So let's look at this. So I'm going to look at two earlier versions of this poem. The first is the version many of you are familiar with, called Errantry. This is the poem, of course, a slightly revised version of which was published in The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is where most people have read it, probably. This is not the text of that version. This is the text of the earlier version that was published independently. As I said last time, he published a lot of poetry. Especially from that period. Okay, no, I didn't say this last time. I said this on Saturday in the finale when we talked about the Mew Lips poem, which was super fun. Got into some serious, intense... Oh, man. The Mew Lips is so interesting from a metrical standpoint. Whew, mind-blowing. But you can see that on YouTube. Anyway, or Twitch. The point is, in that session, I was saying, in that period in the late 20s and early 30s, Tolkien was publishing poems. That's when The Adventures of Tom Bombadil was published. That's when the original version of the Mew Lips was published, and several other things. Fourth Dauntless, if you want to look at the fullest set of versions of this poem, it's in the Treason of Isengard. When Christopher gets to this point of in the drafting, when Bilbo's poem is incorporated for the first time in the text, Christopher does like a whole chapter on this poem. Yeah, okay, yeah, Matt, there is a really interesting question about Bilbo's intended audience. Let's hold on to that question. I don't want to talk about that question yet. First, because I want to talk about errantry, but also because I will be interested to talk about that in the context of the reception, like right afterwards, right? So let's address that question either on the 5th or on the 12th if we don't talk about it on the 5th, all right? Okay, all right. So here's the original version of this poem. Tell me what you hear. We've sort of trained our ears to be used to the rhythm and the rhyme of the Eärendil poem, right? Tell me what you hear here. There was a merry passenger, a messenger, a mariner. He built a gilded gondola to wander in, and had in her a load of yellow oranges and porridge for his provender. He perfumed her with marjoram and cardamom and lavender. He called the winds of Argosies with cargoes in to carry him across the rivers 17 that lay between to tarry him. So this is just the beginning of the poem. Goes on quite a bit. We'll keep going. But let's just pause for a second. Very even beat, JJ. Yes, a very even beat. Good. What else do you hear? What else do you... Notice, of course, the shape is the same, right? Same shape, rhyme shape, right? So we've got the trisyllable rhymes on 2 and 4. It's in quatrains. Trisyllable lines on 2 and 4. Mariner, had in her, provender, lavender, carry him, tarry him, right? So we can see that same pattern in the quatrains. Internal rhyme, right? Passenger, messenger, gondola, wander in, oranges and porridge for, marjoram, cardamom, right? Argosies, cargoes in, 17 lay between, right? Trisyllable rhymes in both places, both at 2 and 4, and at the inside of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? At those pivots, just like we've been seeing. Same number of syllables per line, So, I mean, like, on paper, the structure is almost exactly the same as the Eärendil poem. Almost exactly the same. What makes it sound different? Can you hear that? This is super tricky, by the way. It's one thing to be able to read a poem carefully and be able to, like, observe changes in meter or, like, changes in rhyme scheme and stuff. But when two poems have the same meter and the same rhyme scheme, but sound totally different, like, how? Identifying how gets much harder, right? Spiritual cushions. I agree. The structure is more prominent. Yes. The structure is more prominent. I would say, just to add to that, the trisyllable rhymes are much closer. Marjoram, cardamom, yellow oranges and porridge for, argosies with cargoes in, the river 17 that lay between. They're much stronger rhymes. We saw that a lot of those earlier, the one like from the Eärendil poem, were kind of gentler, right? We had the echo of the sound, right? But it was more like an echo often than a full rhyme, right? Fourth Dauntless, yes, it is more enjammed. Absolutely, it is more enjammed. Remember when we were looking at syntax, right? Now, we had a bunch of those more complicated ones, in the second half, right, where we got some enjambment and stuff. But there were, especially at the beginning, the quatrains tended to be sentences, right? But not only are these quatrains not sentences, look at where the quatrains end, right? Now, especially, there's really only one example that we have here, and that's the first one, right? So just starting at line 3, he built a gilded gondola to wander in and had in her a load of yellow oranges, right? And had in her a load of yellow oranges, right? So he separates the verb and the direct object between quatrains, right? It's completely impossible to pause between those quatrains, right? It absolutely forces you to rumble on really quickly, right? And so Crystal, sorry, enjammed, of course, enjambment is when you sort of roll straight from the end of, you don't pause at the end of a line, right? So for instance, if you look at it, line 2, right? There was a merry passenger, a messenger, a mariner. He built a gilded gondola. So, right, there's like a pause at the end of mariner, and then you start a new thing, right? A new clause with he built. Whereas, and had in her a load of yellow oranges, right? So to wander in and had in her a load of yellow oranges, you can't stop at the end of that line, right? That line is enjammed right into the next line, right? He perfumed her with marjoram and cardamom and lavender. Those are enjammed too. So the enjambment, it's not just that there's more enjambment, is that the two stanzas are enjammed, or not the stanzas, the two quatrains, the two sets of 4 lines are enjammed together. So you have to do pretty much the whole thing in one breath, and indeed those first 8 lines are one sentence, right? There are pauses, it's possible to breathe, but you're kind of like discouraged from breathing, right? Now, Matt, good. I agree. The alliteration makes a big deal here too. There's a lot of alliteration. Now we have seen alliteration in the Eärendil poem as well, but this is much more prominent, right? And as Matt points out, the alliteration falls on the stressed syllables. There was a merry passenger, a messenger, a mariner. He built a gilded gondola to wander in, and had in her a load of yellow oranges and porridge for his provender. He perfumed her with marjoram and cardamom and lavender. Yes. Yes. It does make it much more bouncy and more, I don't know, a little silly. So Eärendilian. Here's here's the thing. There's a problem. I'm not really reciting this poem correctly. Because to recite this poem correctly, I would have to be reading it faster than I am. Let me try. One breath. There was a merry passenger, a messenger, a mariner. He built a gilded gondola to wander in, and had in her a load of yellow oranges and porridge for his provender. He perfumed her with marjoram and cardamom and lavender. That's at least the pace at which it's meant to be read. And we know this because Tolkien actually left instructions about how this is to be performed aloud. And his instructions are as fast as possible and accelerating as you go, ideally. This is meant to be done at speed. Yes. Yes, a lot of people have noticed the similarity with that, like, how well this works as a Gilbert and Sullivan thing, how much this sounds like I am the very model of a modern Major General. In some ways. Fourth Dauntless now wants to hear it sung to that. I'm actually working on something different, Fourth Dauntless. What I want to do is find the perfect rap beat to set this to, so that I could rap this, because that could totally be done. But I haven't found the right beat yet, because it has to be done double time. So anyway, it's, that would be way better, in my opinion. But anyhow, what's the story? A mad violinist. Tell Crystal, I tried Rap God. It doesn't work. Because you can't. It's too slow on the beat, and also the beat of Rap God is too irregular. I need a much more steady beat. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, Robinson. So, I was having a conversation about this at New England Moot. We had a talk about this. Never mind. I won't go any. I won't go any further with this. But we'll see. Anyway, okay. So, what's the story? Who is this guy? Who's our protagonist? Who is the he? What do we know about him? He's a passenger, which is kind of interesting, right? Good. Gordy, he is a messenger. He's got a job, right? Notice the progression there is a little odd, isn't it? Passenger, a messenger, a mariner. If we'd led with mariner, we'd have had a clearer idea. He's a mariner, a messenger, a passenger. A passenger? In what sense is he a passenger? Yeah, Bricktails, it does sound like he's not the captain, right? I guess. He's a mariner. He sails on the sea. He does have a job. He's supposed to deliver a message. But he's also in some sense a passenger. Like he's not really driving the boat. Okay? But what about his boat? What do we learn about his boat? He built the boat. Good. A gilded gondola. What's a gondola? What's a gondola? What kind of a boat is a gondola? No, Mad Violin is not terribly epic. No. Yeah, a small riverboat, like what you pole, right? A canal boat? Absolutely. very small boat. Yeah. It's gilded, though, so it's pretty. And he's going to go wandering in it. And what did he have in his boat? Oranges and porridge. He's packed oranges and porridge. And he perfumed it with marjoram and cardamom and lavender. So several different spices. So it smells nice, and it has porridge and oranges, and it's a rather impractical boat to wander too very far in. Right? Okay. He called the winds of Argosies with cargoes in to carry him across the rivers 17 that lay between to tarry him. And Edith, I agree, it doesn't seem to me very practical food either. But the food might not be practical, but it does rhyme, right? It does rhyme. And that seems to be the joke, right? That it rhymes. Oranges and porridge for his provender. Similarly, Argosies with cargoes in also rhymes, but doesn't several of you are noting with satisfaction that he is unlikely to get scurvy. Perhaps in that way it's practical, but you know what? Not really. Not for a long journey. If you just pack a bunch of fresh oranges, you're not going to get too far. You might not get scurvy, but you won't have much to eat after a few days either. So, you know, you're right. No scurvy. and he'll have low cholesterol, Chris. You're absolutely right. Yeah, good. An exotic craft with exotic provisions and even more exotic scents, right? That thing which is most crucial when you're going on a voyage. Yeah. Now, good. Arieliana. What an excellent name, and I don't remember seeing you before, so welcome. Why would a messenger be wandering? If he has a message to deliver, he should know where he's going, and that's an excellent point, right? A messenger, to wander in, those we do, perhaps we can detect a potential problem from the beginning there, right? Okay. So, how about that third quatrain, the second stanza? He called the winds of Argosies with cargoes in to carry him across the river 17 that lay between to tarry him. Okay, excellent question, Eärendil. That's just what I was going to ask. What are Argosies? They know what an Argosy is? It's a good Shakespeare word. It's a very Merchant of Venice word. I always think of the Merchant of Venice when I see that word. Yeah, Argosies are ships, merchant ships, carrying goods. That's why there are Argosies with cargoes in, right? Because you generally have cargoes in an Argosy. So it's, an Argosy is a large ship, a large merchant ship. So yes, the winds of Argosies would be something like trade winds, right? He called the winds of Argosies with cargoes in to carry him across the river 17 that lay between to tarry him. I don't know what that means, honestly. Okay. Are the Argosies like Argos from Greek mythology? Yes, that's where the name comes from. Anyway, from the Argo. But it's not a reference to the Argo. It's a reference to the kind of ship, which is called an Argosy. Okay, but what I don't understand. He's calling the winds of Argosies with cargoes in, which sounds like he's hitting the open sea, right? But then he's calling the wind to carry him across the river 17 that lay between. So if he were just going down 17 rivers, then, you know, Flammifer, as you say, maybe he's in the right kind of boat after all, right? If he's just traveling on the rivers. But he doesn't say he's going down the rivers, he's going across them, right? To carry him across the river 17. That lay between. Between what? Between him and what? I mean, if he's in his boat, how are there 17 rivers between him and something else? I'm not sure I get it. I'm not sure I understand what's being described there. Yes, Flammifer, gondolas do not normally have sails. You're absolutely correct about that, which makes it a little bit odd that he's calling for the winds to carry him. Right? Yeah, and good. Bricktails and someone else was mentioning the Mad Violinist. You were talking about the odd use of tarry, right? To tarry him. We did get he tarried for a little while, right? Eärendil did, right? But here there's a concern that the River 17 are gonna tarry him in some sense, right? Yeah, it's exactly. It's normally, tarry is normally an intransitive verb, meaning a verb that does not take a direct object. Here it's being used as a transitive verb with a direct object, him, right? To tarry him. Here is my suspicion when I get to this point. I get to this point and I'm thinking, you know what? The more I think about this, the less sense this is making, right? I'm not sure that it's supposed to make sense. And notice something. Did you get the story when I read it the first couple times? Were you following the story? I bet you weren't. At least I never do. Even when I read it aloud, I rarely follow it the first time, right? Because it's just like the sound is so distracting. It's so bouncy and sing-song and rhyme-rich, right? And alliteration-rich. Yeah, Crownless, I agree. It is very like Tom Bombadillo, right? Like some of his nonsense stuff, right? So I'm not sure that, again, like, so when we're asking across the river 17 that lay between, when we begin to try to sort out the thorny question of like 17 rivers lay between him and what, and it just doesn't work, right? I kind of get the sense that no, it's just, it rhymes, right? River 17 that lay between, right? That's the point. The poem begins to sound like merely a kind of verbal exercise, right? It's not to say that there's going to be no story at all, but that the actual sense of the lines, the sense of the words of the sentences is far less important. I mean, it works grammatically. You could diagram it, though. Chris, as you and Fourth Dauntless were pointing out, he's already doing funky things with the verb tarry there, right? So yes, the rhythm and the structure overshadow the content, Ray Burns. That's exactly it. This is more, it's supposed to be fun and done at speed, right? Does not really seem like a poem that is supposed to be thought through carefully the way that we were thinking through the other one, right? So let's keep going and see what we continue to see. He landed all in loneliness where stonily the pebbles on the running river Darrelin goes merrily forever on. He wandered over meadowland to shadowland in dreariness, and under hill and over hill a rover still to weariness. He sat and sang a melody, his errantry a tarrying. He begged a pretty butterfly that fluttered by to marry him. She laughed at him, deluded him, eluded him unpitying. So long he studied wizardry and sigildry and smithying. Okay, yes, yeah, JJ, whoa, hang on. Now, how do you do the CH in your name? Is it Racentia or Rakentia? Is it like Rachel with an NTIA at the end, I wonder? That's another new one on me. Either works. No, don't tell me that. Tell me how you want it pronounced. I don't want to guess. Yeah, anyway. Okay, so, yeah, as Valori says, he ditched the boat for years to be a wizard smith to impress a bug. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I love the play of sounds in this section. I'm really in this whole poem. This whole poem is a delight to say, and I think a delight to hear, right? He landed all in loneliness where stonily the pebbles on the running river Eärendil goes merrily forever on. Notice the play of both the vowel sounds but also the consonantal sounds, right? It's easy to miss that because the rhymes are so strong. But listen to how this goes beyond alliteration, right? To like just the play with a particular consonantal sound. He landed all in loneliness where stonily the pebbles on, right? Look at the L's. Landed all in loneliness where stonily the pebbles on, right? You know, that's we're doing L's in like every possible way that we can do L's, right? There. At the beginning, at the end, in the middle, different ways in the middle. As well as playing with some really closely rhyming lines like loneliness and stonily. I could just say those two words back to back all day long, right? Yeah, Baruthiel asks very sensibly, can pebbles do anything in any manner other than stonily, right? Yeah. But then, of course, like, so then after the L's, we shift to R's. So it's like liquids all day long, right? The running river Eärendil goes merrily forever on. Again, look at all the R's, right? Not just the initial R's, right? Running river Eärendil goes merrily forever on. And the way that those four lines just flow out the L's and the R's, right? He landed all in loneliness where stonily the pebbles on the running river Eärendil goes merrily forever on. I mean, that is so much fun, right? But wait, what were we talking about? Oh, he landed in loneliness, which means I think that the place that he landed is lonely. Like there's nobody else there, but maybe it's him. Maybe he's lonely, but I'm not really quite sure. He wandered over meadowland and shadowland and dreariness, and under hill and over hill a rover still to weariness. Mad Violinist, I agree with you. We get the L's and R's continuing in the second quatrain as well. Though notice that we get very few. In fact, we only get one word in the entire second quatrain that begins with either an L or an R, right? And yet, exactly as you say, the L's and R's keep coming, right? Wandered over meadowland to shadowland and dreariness, and under hill and over hill a rover still to weariness. Oh man, so good, right? Yes, the verbal play of this poem, I think, is clearly more important than the content, but it isn't without content, right? So he's a mariner, but he's certainly wandering now, and he's definitely wandering overland, right? He appears to have left his boat. Wherever exactly he was sailing, which I'm still not quite sure of, he's landed now, and he's wandering around. Over meadowland to shadowland and dreariness. I love that he just wanders to dreariness. And under hill and over hill. And yes, it's hard not to think of Bilbo. I agree with you guys when we get to that line. But again, I love the rhyme. Over hill, a rover still. Right? So good. Yeah, Valori, I hope his message wasn't too urgent either. Then He sat and sang a melody, his errantry a tarrying. He begged a pretty butterfly that fluttered by to marry him. She laughed at him, deluded him, eluded him unpitying, so long he studied wizardry and sigildry and smithying. And that, I think that's the point in which I think this is when he invents the word sigildry. He loves this word, and he'll use it several times. Yeah. Okay, so what's weird about that paragraph? What's weird about it? What isn't weird? Yeah, I understand. He proposes to a butterfly? Is this a serious proposal? He's going to get married to a butterfly? A pretty butterfly that fluttered by? Question. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? I love it. You guys want her to be a fairy. She has an airish spirit. It says she's a butterfly. Yeah, Ray, exactly. Is this guy human? Do we have any reason to think he's human? Maybe your concerns about his getting scurvy were premature. Right? Now, Bricktails, you're right. She just fluttered by, so they haven't had much of a long-term relationship left. Ambrosius Aurelianus is wondering if he's a butterfly. He could be a beetle. We don't know. It's not said anything. Right? How big is he? He's sailing in a gondola, but we don't really know. Several of you are concerned about the oranges, though. I mean, if his boat has full oranges, then, he can't be that small. Exactly, JJ. How big are the oranges, right? Do we know? They could, the oranges could be to scale, right? They could be very small. Well, let's keep reading. But first of all, why is he studying wizardry and sigildry and smithying? Why is he doing that? Yeah, Mad Violinist, it seems to have something to do with the girl, with the butterfly, right? I mean, we're told, yeah, exactly, Mary. It seems to want to capture the butterfly. Like, she laughed at him, deluded him, eluded him, unpitying. So long he studied wizardry and sigildry and smithying. Yeah. And Aslan's Compass, by the way, I totally agree that it sounds like a Lotro profession. In fact, like, I would absolutely love to play a Lotro character who had, like, if I could choose wizardry and sigildry and smithying as my 3 crafting professions, oh man, that would be the best. Yeah. He wove a tissue airy thin to snare her in, to follow in. He made him beetle leather wing and feather wing and swallow wing. He caught her in bewilderment, in filament of spider thread. He built a little bower house, a flower house, to hide her head. He made her shoes of diamond on fire and a shimmering. A boat he built her marvellous, a carvel all a glimmering. He threaded gems in necklaces, and recklessly she squandered them, as fluttering and wavering and quavering they wandered on. They fell to bitter quarrelling, and sorrowing he sped away. On windy weather wearily and drearily he fled away. Interesting. Okay, I see. There's a growing theory among folks on the Discord chat here that perhaps the gondola is in fact the basket under a hot air balloon. Maybe he's ballooning at the beginning rather than sailing, which would explain him crossing rivers in his ship. It would explain the winds pushing him. Okay, I'd have expected something to come up a little bit more earlier on, about the fact that he was flying. But, it's not impossible. Yeah. But balloons don't carry cargoes. No, well, but you could fit some oranges, depending on the size of the oranges and the size of the gondola in question. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So let's JJ, I think if we're imagining zeppelins, I don't think we're going in the right direction here. Yeah, and Chris, I don't know if the swallow wing was an African or European swallow wing. It doesn't specify. But what do we get in this stanza? Yeah, Fourth Dauntless, I agree. The enjambment is much less prominent in this stanza. Notice how slowly I read it, right? That was kind of a mistake. But this is not a stanza that really draws you on. In fact, if you notice, we have a relatively hard stop at the end of every single quatrain, either a period or a semicolon at the end of every single quatrain of this stanza, which has not been super common in this poem so far. But let's see. What do we learn about him here? He weaves a tissue airy thin to snare her in. So he's gonna capture her, which isn't a good look. To follow in, he made him beetle leather wing, and feather wing, and swallow wing. So he makes wings for himself to pursue her, right? And he makes it with beetle leather and feathers and swallow. He makes a swallow wing or something. And then he catches her in bewilderment, in filament of spider thread. Yeah, Lincoln, I agree with you. When you read long enough, you realize the poem tells a coherent story, even if a lot of the details are nonsense. Yes, I agree. Which is why I'm trying not to lean too heavily on the details here, but try to get the big picture. He does catch her in a filament of spider thread. He catches her in bewilderment. Okay? And he builds a little bower house, a flower house, to hide her head. So he makes a marriage bower with her in a flower. Yes, he studied magic to kidnap her, Valori. Absolutely. He wasn't having it. She was spurning him, deluding him and eluding him unpityingly, right? Laughing at him, right? And he said, forget about it, right? And catches her and marries her and builds her a little bower house in a flower and makes her diamond shoes and builds her a marvelous little boat and threads gems in necklaces, and she squanders those, and then they fall to bitter quarreling. Yes, I agree. I think systematically this is a very bad example, right? This is a poor role model in every way, right? This is a cautionary tale. I agree. But doesn't he sound kind of diminutive? Anybody else getting the impression that this dude is on the diminutive side? Because that's what it's kind of sounding like to me. That I'm thinking that the relationship with the butterfly, she's just a butterfly. And I think he's probably her size, roughly. She could be a butterfly of unusual size. It is possible. But so would the flowers have to be of unusual size. Yeah. It's a BOUS. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think that this dude is pretty small. I think he's pretty small. I'm beginning to think that those oranges might be undersized. That's what I'm beginning to think. Let's keep going. He passed the archipelagos where yellow grows the marigold, where countless silver fountains are, and mountains are of fairy gold. He took to war and foraying, a harrying beyond the sea, a roaming over Belmarie and Thelemy and fantasy. He made a shield in Morian of coral and of ivory, a sword he made of emerald, and terrible his rivalry, with all the knights of Éire and Faerie and Thelemy, of crystal was his habergeon, his scabbard of chalcedony. His javelins were of malachite and stalactite, he brandished them, and went and fought the dragonflies of paradise and vanquished them. Yeah, I don't think BOUSs exist either, Matt. I agree. Yeah, he's fighting dragonflies. Vanquishing dragonflies. Right? Yeah. Agreed. It does sound like he's... this does seem like further evidence of his small size. Right? Again, those first two lines are two other lines that I could just say again and again and again. He passed the archipelagos where yellow grows the marigold. Oh, man. Archipelagos where yellow grows. That is so beautiful. I just love that rhyme. Where countless silver fountains are and mountains are of fairy gold. Yeah. So is this a Tom Thumb story? Sorta? Kinda? What this is a fairy story. See, it takes a while. Tolkien readers are so good. Tolkien, I think, I would hope that Tolkien would be super proud of his readers. Because Tolkien readers really take him very seriously, which is great. And totally appropriate. Tolkien, of course, in On Fairy Stories, as many of you know, speaks almost violently against diminutive Victorian fairy stories. Like all these fairies, the fairies of cowslips and bluebells, he speaks with scorn of such stories. But then you go back and you read his early poetry, and it is full of flower fairies, little winged Tinkerbell flower fairies, which he does eventually come to reject. But it's really clear from his early poetry, especially his really early poetry. Read Goblin Feet, right? Read Goblin Feet, read Tin Fang Warble, read even Cortarian Among the Trees, certainly The Cottage of Lost Play, the whole Book of Lost Tales. And there's even a memory of it that lingers still in The Lord of the Rings, right? Exactly, Bruinir. When he begins, instead of saying, there's no such thing as tiny fairies, what he does is explain how exactly, Bruenir, just as you say, how medieval fairies became diminutive Tinkerbellish fairies, right? What does Galadriel say when she passes the test? What does Galadriel say? I shall diminish and go into the west. Yes. When Galadriel says it in the Fellowship of the Ring, she seems to mean I shall take on a lesser role, right? I shall give up my power in Middle-earth. I shall become less significant, right? And go away. Originally, in the Book of Lost Tales, when the elves diminished after at the coming of the Dominion of Men, it was literal. They got smaller. They became tiny little fairies that could hide in flowers. That's how. So his first impulse, his original impulse, back when he was in his 20s, was not to say, pitch the whole Victorian fairy tradition. His first impulse was to say, how did this happen? How did we get from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the Green Knight as fairy, to Puck in Midsummer Night's Dream? How did we get there? Right? Yes, exactly, Harnuth. So elves ended up in Keebler cookie bakeries. Exactly. That would have been Galadriel's destiny had she remained in Middle-earth. She'd have been making cookies at some point or other, or like helping with Christmas presents or whatever. Right? Exactly, Bruenir. Ariel had to shrink to get into the Cottage of Lost Play. And Bruenir, for my money, I find Christopher Tolkien's commentary on those early poems and those early chapters of the Book of Lost Tales hilarious, because Christopher is trying to reconcile his father's invective against diminutive fairies with what is obviously there, and he is very shy about wanting to be like, yeah, so Dad was totally into diminutive fairies in his early days. Right? That's but it's anyway. I love that section. But anyway, yeah. So errantry seems clearly to be in that tradition. Yes, he is fighting the Knights of Aery and Fairy and Thelemy, but they, I think, are also diminutive. They're diminutive, right? I think everybody in this poem is diminutive. Well, Harnuth, some of his early stories were written with his young boys in mind. I will also add that some of his early poems were written with his wife in mind. And Edith, according to report, loved fairy stories, those kinds of fairy stories. Goblin Feet, in particular, is often understood to be a poem written to please Edith. And of course, the cottage, You and Me in the Cottage of Lost Play is a poem about him and Edith. Now, I'm not saying that Edith is the butterfly. No, this is not autobiographical. I'm just saying Edith loved these kinds of fairy stories. Okay, so this is why he's able to proposition a butterfly and fight with dragonflies. Also, look at his armor. We do get the arming scene, right? He made a shield in Morion of coral and of ivory. A sword he made of emerald. So his sword is made out of an emerald, which is a little weird. His habergeon is made of crystal, which is also a little bit odd. Kind of cool, though. And, of course, his scabbard is of chalcedony. That's the only line, by the way, that's identical. It's the only line that will remain unchanged in every version of this poem. The one single line, his scabbard of chalcedony, will appear in every single version of this poem. Yeah. Anyway, his javelins were of malachite and stalactite. I love that rhyme, but again, it doesn't make too much sense. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Because the next stanza contains everybody's favorite line. He battled with the Dumbledores and Bumbles and the honeybees, and won the golden honeycomb, and running home on sunny seas in ships of leaves and gossamer, with blossom for a canopy, he polished up and furbished up and burnished up his panoply. He tarried for a little while in little isles, and plundered them, and webs of all the adder cops he shattered them and sundered them. Then coming home with honeycomb and money none to memory, his errand came, his message came, an errand too. In daring do and glamoury he had forgot them, journeying and tourneying a wanderer. So now he must depart again and start again his gondola, for ever still a messenger, a passenger, a terrier, a roving as a feather does, a weather-driven mariner. He battled with the Dumbledores. Everybody loves that line. Of course, a Dumbledore means a bumblebee. That's what a Dumbledore is. So yeah, Fourth Alice, pretty sure he was jousting with other pint-sized heroes. Absolutely. And now he's going on, having vanquished the dragonflies of paradise, which, by the way, is an awesome title. There weren't enough characters, or I would have named my fantasy football team the Dragonflies of Paradise, but it didn't fit. Anyway, then he goes and he battles with the Dumbledores, the Bumbles, and the honeybees, and wins the golden honeycomb, which, of course, is like the diminutive version of the golden fleece, right? It's kind of like the golden fleece, except it's a golden honeycomb, right? And running home, I love that rhyme too. On sunny seas, in ship of leaves and gossamer, with blossom for a canopy, he polished up and furbished up and burnished up his panoply. So he's made a new ship. So his first ship, whatever it was, whether it was an airship or a water ship, it wasn't super important, because he made this is his third ship of the poem, right? He made the Carvel, right, for the butterfly before, a little pleasure boat, and now he's making another one, a ship of leaves and gossamer. Yeah, exactly, Bruinier. That's just what Bumbles are, abominable snowmen. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's what it's referring to there. Yep. Leaves and gossamer is what his ship is made out of. Leaves and gossamer. So, sorry, now I'm trying to imagine if that one's an airship too. I still can't imagine that he wouldn't mention it, but anyway. Okay. We get the adder cops, of course, right? People love the adder cops. You get the feeling that Bilbo had read this poem, right? I mean, there's a reason. We have precedent for the fact that spiders don't like to be called adder cops, right? You could tell because of this poem. Right? JJ points out that Eärendil's poem comes from this, and Eärendil had an airship. Possibly. Didn't Bilbo write this poem, Aslan's Compass? Well, no, it predates him. Honestly. This poem was written before Bilbo existed. So Bilbo follows this poem, not the other way around. Again, here we're kind of stepping outside the fictional frame of the Eärendil poem, right? Bilbo's Eärendil poem, and thinking about, in Tolkien's writing career, where does it get to? Because when we get there, we'll see it coming in. Yeah. No, I'm totally down with the airship idea. Again, I find it strange that he keeps just using nautical metaphors without ever suggesting that it's not other than that. But anyway. But then, of course, we get the joke at the end, The joke at the end is that he's done all these things. He comes home with his honeycomb. Like a conquering hero, he's vanquished the dragonflies and the Dumbledores, and he's come home with the golden honeycomb. And then he gets home and he's like, oh, I had a message I was supposed to deliver. I had a job that whole time, right? So he's got to go out again. He's got to start again as Gondola. So he is locked in this perpetual loop, right? Forever still a messenger, a passenger, a terrier, a roving as a feather does, a weather-driven mariner. Because you know he's going to get sidetracked again. Like, whatever message it is he's supposed to deliver, he's never going to get there, right? He's never going to get there. So, that's errantry. That's errantry. So, okay. This poem is delightful. Primarily a delightful play of sounds, right? It's a silly poem. It's a joke. The whole thing comes to a joke, and wait, there's more. Again, in the set of instructions Tolkien left about how you're supposed to read this. So you're supposed to read it fast, and faster all the way through. And then when you get to the end, you're supposed to start again at the beginning without pausing. Okay? So, a roving as a feather does, a weather-driven mariner. There was a merry passenger, a messenger, a mariner, and you keep going, right? And the joke is you keep going until somebody notices and tells you to stop, right? That's the joke. That's how you're supposed to recite this poem. Okay, now Tolkien is writing The Fellowship of the Ring, and he wants Bilbo to recite a poem in Rivendell. So he says, I think I'll use errantry. I'll have him do this. Whether it was because he thought that the verse form, the really playful verse form, was something that Bilbo would enjoy, right? That seemed very Bilbo-ish, or not. Anyway, whatever was the reason, he decided to give this poem to Bilbo. So he revises it. There was a gallant passenger, a messenger, a mariner. He built a boat and gilded her, and silver oars he fashioned her. Her sails he wove of gossamer and blossom of the cherry tree, and lightly as a feather in the weather went she merrily. He floated from a haven fair of maidenhair and everfern. The waterfalls he proudly rode where loudly flowed the Merryburn. And dancing on the foam he went on roving bent forever on, from ever morning journeying, while murmuring the river on to valleys in the gloaming ran. And slowly then on pillow cool he laid his head, and fast asleep he passed the weeping willow pool. The weedy reeds were whispering, and mists were in the meadowland, and down the river hurried him, and carried him to Shadowland. The sea beside a stony shore there lonely roared, and under moon a wind arose, and wafted him, a castaway beyond the moon. Okay. Less bouncy, right? Feel that? Much less bouncy. There's still a lot of really interesting verbal playfulness, right? My favorite couplet, possibly my favorite couplet in this entire version of the poem, is the first two lines of the second stanza. He floated from a haven fair of maidenhair and everfern. I love that, because haven fair and maidenhair is a wonderful three-syllable rhyme, right? But notice what he does. He's got haven fair, maidenhair, everfern. So he takes haven fair, right? And he takes all the vowels and rhymes the vowels exactly with maidenhair. And then he takes the consonants, right? The V and the F, and he shifts them to everfern at the end, so that those three words all like just kind of ring the changes on those, on like that, the vowel and consonantal combination in haven fair, right? I love that. It's so much fun. Okay. So we can see from the very first line that we're in a different place, right? This dude is gallant, right? He's not merry, he's gallant. There was a gallant passenger, a messenger, a mariner. He built a boat and gilded her, in silver oars he fashioned her. It's got oars, right? This is much more practical. It's not just a gondola, it's a boat with oars, right? Now, it does have cherry tree blossom sails, which seems a little bit odd, right? But, so, like, is this a full-size ship or not a full-size ship? I'm not really sure. But we're definitely sailing down a river, right? He floated from a haven fair of maidenhair and everfern. The waterfalls he proudly rode, where loudly flowed the merry burn. He's riding the waterfalls, right? Woo-hoo. And dancing on the foam he went, on roving bent forever on, from ever morning journeying, while murmuring the river on, to valleys in the gloaming ran. And slowly then on pillow cool he laid his head, and fast asleep he passed the weeping willow pool. So he's going down the river, right? And he gets sleepy, and he lays his head on pillow cool and falls fast asleep in his boat, right? There's his boat going past the weeping willow pool. The windy reeds were whispering, and mists were in the meadowland, and down the river hurried him, and carried him to Shadowland. Oh, okay. So he's passing through Shadowland while asleep in his boat, right? The sea beside a stony shore there lonely roared, and under moon a wind arose and wafted him, a castaway beyond the moon. Wait a second. So he doesn't land on the stony shore like the old guy did, the errantry dude, right? He gets to the sea. The sea beside a stony shore there lonely roared. So he's still asleep, right? Come down his boat to the sea. And under moon, a wind arose and wafted him, a castaway beyond the moon. Whoa. So he's wafted by the wind beyond the moon. So he's under moon, right? Moon is in the air when he gets down to the sea. And then a wind arises and wafts him beyond the moon. A castaway. Something weird just happened here. He woke again forlorn afar, by shores that are without a name, and by the shrouded island o'er the silent water floating came. Yeah, for dauntless, he's been accidentally blown out of the world. Well, accidentally for him anyway. Yeah, no, it totally happens. Rakentia, I'm going to call you with a hard K because I don't remember what you said. Rakentia, absolutely. Yeah, it totally happens. Totally happens. Yeah. Well, whether the moon's up in the sky or down near the horizon, if you're going to get behind it, you're going to get airborne, right? And he wakes up and he finds himself by shores that are without a name. By the shrouded island or the silent water floating came. Whoa, shrouded island and the silent water? Is he past the water of death? Man. Exactly, Flambifer. He's not a castaway from his boat, right? It's not shipwrecked, which is normally how you get to be a castaway, as you say, but he's a castaway from the world. Yeah. He seems to be finding himself in Fairy, because look where he is. He passed the archipelagos where yellow grows the marigold, and landed on the elven strands of silver sand and fallow gold, beneath the hill of Ilmarin, where glimmer in a valley sheer the elven lights of Tirion, the city on the Shadowmere. Look at there! He's in Fairy. And not just any Fairy, he's in Valinor. He wakes up to find himself there, having been wafted beyond the moon. He doesn't know how. He fell asleep. And finds himself in Fairy. So we get that same couplet, he passed the archipelagos where yellow grows the marigold, which was just one of the random marvels encountered by the errantry dude. And now it is the signal, like the archipelagos where yellow grows the marigold are like Elvenhome, turns out. right? Toleresia. Okay. Yeah, exactly. He's blown onto the straight path. Exactly it, Recentia and Fourth Dauntless. He tarried there his errantry, and melodies they taught to him, and lays of old, and marvels told, and harps of gold they brought to him. Of glamour of glamour, I think that must be a mistake. Of glamoury, that has to be, there needs to be a Y there. Of glamoury he tidings heard, and binding words of sigildry, of wars they spoke with enemies that venom used in wizardry. So he tarries there in Fairy, because why not? He was there, he was just wandering around minding his own business, sailing, right? And then boom, he's in Fairy. So what's he going to do? He's going to tarry there a while, right? And he learns melodies and lays of old and marvels and gets harps of gold brought to him. That's awful nice. And he hears tidings of glamoury and binding words of sigildry. That is, remember they're telling him lays of old and marvels, right? So he hears about the wonders of the ancient world, binding words of sigildry, of wars they spoke with enemies that venom used in wizardry. So the enemies are using the venom and wizardry. Okay? In panoply of elven kings, in silver rings they armoured him. His shield they writ with elven runes, that never wound did harm to him. His bow was made of dragon horn, his arrows shorn of ebony. Of woven steel his habergeon, his scabbard of chalcedony. His sword was hewn of adamant, his helm a shining emerald, and terrible the light of it. Okay. I missed a line. I might have missed a line typing this. I think I did. Yeah, that quatrain suspiciously only has 3 lines. I think I missed a line. Sorry about that. Notice how much more grandiose the arming is. Sounds a lot more like Eärendil than it does the errantry guy, right? And valiant the might of it. Thank you. His sword was hewn of adamant, and valiant the might of it. His helm was shining emerald, and terrible the light of it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brunir. Appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. So, I don't think that this guy is small. In fact, doesn't this sound like the story of a mortal man who has been abducted by the fairies, right? Who, minding his own business, finds himself transported to Fairy. And when he's there, he's now being blessed by the elves, right? Told stories, right? Not just any stories. He's told stories of wars with enemies that venom used in wizardry, right? He's learning about glamoury and binding words of sigildry, not to catch butterflies, right? Not for any sort of scandalous and disreputable romantic relationships. This seems to be a military matter, right? And having told him about wars and taught him melodies and given him marvels and taught him binding words of sigildry and all that kind of thing, he's now being prepared, perhaps himself, to go forth and fight against enemies that venom used in wizardry, right? Seems very possible. And there's a terrible light in his shining emerald helm, right? There's still a green stone involved. It's not his sword anymore. It's now his helm, right? But his bow is made of dragon horn now, and his arrows shorn of ebony. Still the chalcedony scabbard. That's a given. Yeah. Okay. His boat anew for him they built, a timber felled in elven home. Upon the mast a star was set, its spars were wet with silver foam, and wings of swans they made for it, and laid on it a mighty doom, to sail the seas of wind and come where glimmering runs the gliding moon. They built his boat anew, right? New wood. Set a mast on the star. Seeming to confirm, by the way, our theory that the Silmaril was set on the mast. Probably the same place that the star was set here. Who's doing all this? Who's doing all this? The elves. We're not told. We just got lots of they. And we do see the lights of Elven Tyrion and Elven strands, so it's probably elves he's talking to, and he's dressed in the panoply of Elven kings. And it's Elven home timber, so presumably it's elves doing this. No reference to anybody else or anything else. Okay. What's his mighty doom? To sail the winds, the seas of wind, and come where glimmering runs the gliding moon. But why? Like, what mighty doom is laid on him? Well, hang on. Let's see what he does. From Evereven's lofty hills, where softly spill the fountains tall, he passed away, a wandering light, beyond the mighty mountain wall, and unto Evernight he came, and like a flaming star he fell, his javelins of diamond as fire into the darkness fell. Ungoliant abiding there, in spider lair her thread entwined, for endless years a gloom she spun, the sun and moon in web to bind. His sword was like a flashing light, as flashing bright he smote with it. He shore away her poisoned neb, her noisome webs he broke with it. Then shining as a risen star, from prison bars he sped away, and borne upon a blowing wind on flowing wings he spread away. Fled away. How about that? We're not vanquishing the dragonflies of paradise, or the Dumbledores, or the Addercops, right? It's Ungoliant. This is what he's been recruited for, it seems. What he's been tricked out in his armor and his flying ship for. He's got a job. It's an important job. He's going to go slay Ungoliant. And oh my goodness, I love the sound of what he does with the sound of these lines, right? Karita, you're totally right. For endless years a gloom she spun, the sun and moon. Gloom she spun is a really fun phrase, I agree. Ungoliant abiding there in spider lair, her thread entwined. For endless years a gloom she spun, the sun and moon in web to wind. His sword was like a flashing light, as flashing bright he smote with it. He shore away her poisoned neb, her noisome webs he broke with it. Poisoned neb and noisome webs is so wonderful. He does a very similar thing in the Lay of Lathian, of course, when he's describing Baron's adventures in Nandon Gortheb. But yeah. Flammifer says, here we vanquish the big Addercop, and of course in the Silmarillion, he vanquishes the big dragonfly. Yeah, the flying dragon, right, instead. Yeah. Again, as always, Tolkien never throws anything away. Do I think Calagon the Black, the first of the winged dragons, has his root in the dragonflies of paradise? Yeah, actually. Do I think it's a coincidence that character, again, flying dragons and dragonflies, do I think that's a coincidence? No, I don't think that's a coincidence. Exactly. Very good, WKU. In the errantry poem, he says, we have a small person fighting bugs and insects. Here we have a regular-sized person fighting a giant spider. So instead of diminutiveness, we have augmentation. Yeah. He is made the champion of the elves. Absolutely. But wait, there's more. To Evernoon at last he came, and past the flame-encircled hill, where wells of gold for Melaneth her never-resting workers build. The seven-branched levin tree on heaven field he shining saw, upflowering from its writhen root, a living fruit of fire it bore. The lightning in his face was lit, ablaze were set his tresses wan, his eyes with levin beams were bright, and gleaming white his vessel shone. From world's end then he turned away, and yearned again to seek afar his land beneath the morning light, and burning like a beacon star, on high above the mists he came, a distant flame, a mariner, on winds unearthly swiftly borne, uplifted o'er the shadow mere. He passed o'er Calla Cillian, where Tirion the hallowed stands, the sea far under loudly roared on cloudy shores in Shadowland. And over Evermorn he passed, and saw at last the haven fair, far under by the merry burn in Everfern and Maidenhair. But on him mighty doom was laid, till moon should fade and all the stars to pass, and tarry nevermore on hither shore where mortals are. Forever still a passenger, a messenger to never rest, to bear his burning lamp afar, the Flammifer of Westerness. Yes, Karita, the lightning in his face. Oh my goodness, yes, the lightning in his face was lit. So we got that, the Evernoon stanza is like, whoa. I mean, that is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. The visions that he gets in Evernoon, having passed from Evernight and vanquished Ungoliant, he then goes to Evernoon, and he sees the 7-branched levin tree. So levin means lightning. It means lightning. It's an old word for lightning. So this is all like it's this whole stanza is like about lightning. Basically, he sees. So there's a 7-branched tree made out of lightning with writhing roots, upflowering from its writhen root, bearing a living fruit of fire. And the lightning is on his face was lit, and his tresses are set ablaze, and his eyes with levin beams were bright. So he, like lightning shines in his face and comes shooting out of his eyes by the end of it. And his vessel is shining, gleaming white, right? So he has been transformed, twice transformed, right? Transformed first by the elves, right? Who first tell him stories and then, get him excited about the wars, right? And then gird him up and in the armor of elven kings and the panoply of elven kings. And then they pimp his ride, right? And then he kills Ungoliant and goes to Evernoon and has this sort of apotheosis experience where he is now himself. There's no Silmaril, right? He himself is radiant. Tarlonio, I have no idea who Melaneth is. If we know that, I've forgotten. So Cara Cillian, rather. That was Tolkien shifting the spelling conventions and stuff around. He very often used Ks. For Thonleth, let me say, he used Ks much more often in the earlier days. There are a lot of initial, like the things which are hard Cs, he tended to spell with Ks back in like the teens and 20s, especially. Then he took those out for the hard Cs, which was probably not a good move, considering that like it leads lots of people to mispronounce the names of Celeborn and Celebrimbor and things like that. But anyway, a little clearer when they were Ks to start with. But yeah, I think, in fact, I'm pretty sure that Celeborn's name or an analog of it was spelled with a K originally. Yeah. Flammifer, I agree. Melaneth sounds like some kind of divine-ish figure. Like, we don't get any of the Valar. I don't know is Melaneth Elbereth? I don't know. I mean, Varda has been around for a long time, so it's not like he's not invented her yet. This is written after the Book of Lost Tales, so it already exists. What's this poem about? this poem seems... Yes, we do get a whole story, beginning, middle, and end, Mike. Exactly. Exactly. We get a whole story of what he accomplished and what happens to him, right? And the story is ultimately the story of a mortal who is taken into fairy, right? Transformed by that experience, right? I mean, you can't... let's see. As somebody once said, no one ever passes through fairy unchanged, right? I've heard that before. This dude is certainly not unchanged, right? And he seems to be changed for the better, right? I mean, he is made into a mighty hero, something almost godlike at the end. I mean, there's lightning beams in his eyes at the end, right? Come on, the lightning in his face was lit, ablaze were set his tresses wan, his eyes with levin beams were bright and gleaming white, his vessel shone. I mean, yeah, right? He just killed Ungoliant. But his mighty doom comes back to him again, right? His mighty doom comes back to him. And he can't go home. He sees his home. He wants to go home. And he sees, from afar, his home. And over Evermorn he passed, and saw at last a haven fair, far under by the merry burn, in Everfern and Maidenhair, where he launched from. But on him mighty doom was laid, till moon should fade, and all the stars to pass, and tarry nevermore on hither shore where mortals are. He can't go home, Eärendilian, exactly. Exactly. That's the cost. That's the price. Did he know the price in advance? He didn't sign up for any of this, right? But it's, in the end, a kind of a cautionary tale, right? When you, as a mortal, when you encounter fairy, great things happen. You are elevated by that, right? I mean, marvels happen. But, yeah, Rayburns, be careful what you wish for. Yeah. And Catriona, I agree. It does sound like he got used by the elves or denizens of fairy. Absolutely. Yeah. This is the kind of thing that can happen. I mean, people don't choose it and people can't help it. And there's nothing they can do. Right? So that seems to be the moral of this story. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? Well, he's sort of Eärendil. Why would we associate this guy with Eärendil? Let me say the same question another way. What does this dude have in common with Eärendil? JJ, yes. Number one thing, he kills Ungoliant. He kills Ungoliant. Now, if you're sitting at home saying, did I forget the part where Eärendil killed Ungoliant? No, you didn't. It's not in the Silmarillion. But it was one of the things. It was a... Eärendil's story is never told. But there are several places where Tolkien made notes about what Eärendil's story was going to be. Or elements that were going to be included in Eärendil's story. And one of the most consistent elements back at the beginning, in the Book of Lost Tales period, and immediately afterwards, right, was that he was going to end up killing Ungoliant. So Eärendil has 3 stages. The Eärendil story is essentially in 3 different movements, right? Movement number 1. First, Eärendil, the intrepid mariner, the adventurer, right? Who sails further than anyone ever sailed and who, therefore visits places nobody ever visited and has lots and lots of adventures. Very Odysseus-like in that first phase, right? That seemed to be the kind of thing that Tolkien was thinking of for the first part of the story of Eärendil. So from Eärendil's, earliest period up until the crisis comes, he's involved in daring do, as our errantry hero was too. But then there comes a point where, all right, it's time for the message into the west, right? So he sails and he goes and he gets to Valinor and he delivers the message. And then you've got the second period, right? Which is the big pivotal stuff in the middle of Eärendil's life, right? Where he goes to Valinor and then gets sent up into the sky and then ends up coming back and serving as aerial support to the ground troops in the War of Wrath and defeating Ancalagon the Black, right? Then, of course, he goes back to his career as an Orbed star, right? And remains there to this day, apparently, right? And that's the long third stage of Eärendil's career. So that was like the shape of Eärendil's career. Killing Ungoliant was like a staple of that first phase of his life. It's one of his great accomplishments. Tolkien ditched that plan. He decided that, and so, many of you are correctly remembering, of course, that in the published Silmarillion, the end of Ungoliant is not stated certainly, but he is understood to, or she, I should say, Ungoliant, is understood to have, at last in her famine, to have devoured herself. Which, from a, poetic and philosophical perspective, I like much better. But come on, that description of this dude killing Ungoliant was super awesome. Anyway, yeah, Fourth Dauntless, maybe that's part of it. Fourth Dauntless says if Ungoliant is killable, it really diminishes Morgoth. But Fourth Dauntless, what I would say there, though, is it also elevates Eärendil. I can't emphasize this enough. Eärendil is like the elvish messiah in the Book of Lost Tales. I mean, there are prophecies about his birth. There's signs and wonders upon the birth of Eärendil. I mean, he is, the story gets very messianic about, remember there's that whole prophecy about the coming of Eärendil that even kind of survives into the published Silmarillion, though it doesn't seem to make much sense anymore there. But anyway, so Eärendil was a huge, huge, huge deal, though we never got the huge deal stories from him. But anyway, okay. Do you notice in this poem what seems to be almost an evolution as it goes? The very first stanza, it seems very likely that this dude is still small, right? I mean, we still get the cherry tree blossoms, right? Gossamer and cherry tree blossoms and lightly as a feather. I mean, if we just had that first stanza, it sounds like we're still in errantry mode, right? A little less silly already. The lines sound different. It doesn't bounce along, and it doesn't make you think quite so inescapably of Gilbert and Sullivan, right? It sounds like we're still there. Then in the next couple stanzas, it becomes one of Tolkien's favorite kinds of things. It becomes a fairy story. Not the old school fairy story. Errantry was an old Victorian fairy story, like a fairy story involving diminutive and often possibly winged fairies, right? This doesn't belong there, right? This becomes the kind of fairy story that he describes in On Fairy Stories, right? That is a story of a mortal who wanders into fairy, or in this case is abducted into fairy against his will, without his approval, certainly. I mean, while he's asleep, he's wafted and finds himself a castaway out of the world. Then we get, of course, what happens to him here. But as he's when he arrives in Fairy, the story seems to develop again, right? This is not just a random mortal going to a random fairyland, right? He goes to Valinor. And all of a sudden, when we get to the Hill of Ilmarin in Elven Tyrion and the city on the Shadowmere, we're now all of a sudden within Tolkien's mythology, right? We're there all of a sudden, right? And now he's becoming Eärendil, right? Yeah. Hey, there's this suicide mission we need to volunteer for. None of us want to go, says Tarloniel. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much, right? Hey, you interested in a mighty doom? Right? I mean, sounds like fun, right? We'll give you all this sweet bling, right? All this really awesome gear. And having arrived in Valinor, he becomes Eärendil. And he kills Ungoliant, who is named, right? I mean, there's no doubt, there's no question. This is Ungoliant. This is part now of the mythology, right? But there's still the catch. It hasn't forgotten where it was before. Before it was the story of the mortal who wanders into fairy, right? And the mortal who wanders into fairy and who can't really go home is not an uncommon fairy story motif, right? Or you do come home and you find everybody you ever knew has died of old age already, right? Or something like that, right? That is the kind of thing that happens, right? And it's happened to him. So it's like the first step is that the sort of the silly fairy story has evolved into a serious fairy story that is a story of mortals going into fairy and the dire consequences. At least, I don't know if dire is quite the right word. Well, mighty consequences, right? But then that becomes the Eärendil story. But it doesn't cease to be that mortal wandering into fairy story, right? Bilbo hasn't forgotten this. The guy is now Eärendil. He's not been called Eärendil, right? So when Tolkien revises this again, he becomes Eärendil from the... It becomes Eärendil was a mariner, right? And the poetry matures a little bit more, becomes even less silly, right? There's even less of the sort of the pure play with sounds. There is some of it, no question, but we get, but again, the sort of the silliness meter, right, continues to get wound back from errantry to Eärendil was a mariner. It's Eärendil's story from the beginning, and yet it's still the story, as we saw when we were reading the Eärendil story. It's still the story of a mariner who gets drawn in to the fairy realms and wants to go home, but can't. And Belangsmond, I cannot imagine that the speed is supposed to be the same with the Eärendil poem as errantry. You almost can't do it. You can, and I know that Tolkien would recite it fast. Tolkien recited everything fast, but it's hard to do. Yeah, no, it doesn't feel right, Belangsmond. Yeah, you just can't do it. So, Bilbo, these two concepts, I want to tell the story of Eärendil, and I want to tell the story of a mortal and what happens when a mortal goes to live among fairies. These are the two things that first kind of collide, and I wonder kind of accidentally, or rather just out of this kind of evolution. It kind of sounds to me like the story kind of gets away from him and goes in really awesome directions, but I really don't think that this version of this poem ended up where he started it, right? And yeah, so he kept those things mashed up, but he framed it clearly as an Eärendil poem from the beginning. But it doesn't lose that theme. And we still have Bilbo thinking about that. We still have Bilbo contemplating the significance. And of course, it has significance that he himself doesn't even understand, right? There have been costs. He can't go home. He's not being allowed to go home, right? He's made it to Rivendell and now they won't let him leave, right? He wants to go home and go back to Frodo and bring the ring back and they won't let him go, right? He can't go home. And he's never going to go home. And Frodo can't go home, right? Exactly, kid. Exactly. And even though both of them remember that Saruman is going to point out that Frodo has grown, right? And Gandalf is going to tell them that they are among the great ones now, right? And they can handle these things themselves, like scouring the Shire. But also they can't go home. So for me, this, I think that we can hear this as we were seeing last time. I think that we can hear this in the Eärendil poem all by itself. But when we see how this got here, how this went from a silly diminutive fairy poem to a poem that began more serious and grew even more serious as it went, right? Next time, we will talk about this poem, the Eärendil poem, I mean, of course, in its context, right? We'll go back to the prose. We shall resume our discussion of the prose and talk about the reception. And I do think it's important for us to be thinking about Bilbo's motivation. What do we learn about that? What can we glean from what he says, right? What he says or doesn't say. So we'll think about that stuff next time. And don't forget that next time, even though we are, remember next time is not going to be for 2 weeks, but next time is also going to be a special occasion. And we are going to have some very special guests joining us for our discussion next time of the context of this poem and its reception. That is, I will be joined by the two hosts, Alan and Sean of the Prancing Pony podcast. So that's that week, the first week of November, is the official crossover point, sort of our two podcasts discussions of the Lord of the Rings. So they're going to be with me on Tuesday, and our episode that I recorded with them is gonna happen that same week. It's going to be released that same week, the first week of November as well. And it's going to be Chris's birthday. So there you go. Anyway, okay, great. So it's field trip time. Thank you guys for joining me for our poetry discussion tonight. And next week, we're not going to look at poetry, but we are going to still talk about it in its larger context. So thanks, everybody. So thank you for folks who joined me on Twitter. And I'm going to change over the to Twitch. So you can feel free to join us on twitch.tv/SignumU. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, I think.
All right, cool.
Let's see, I gotta fix my audio here. I forgot to put my earbuds in. Okay, let me just double check to make sure the sound is coming through. I think it is.
Okie dokie.
Okay, good. Excellent. All right.
So that was fun. That was
oh,
fun.
Man. Yeah, I both of those poems are so much fun in their own way. I mean, Errantry is the most purely playful poem that Tolkien wrote, I think. I mean, there's nowhere else where we just see him having fun with language in a kind of a purer way, right?
Yeah, and confession, I'm a sucker for the Victorian flower fairies too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. I mean, there's a place for that.
Yeah.
But of course, the Eärendil poem is the Rivendell poem, because again, that was the first time that the poem was placed in the context of Rivendell in the story. That's when that change began to emerge. Anyway, that's the only place. In a very real way, the that poem is like the biggest version of the story of Eärendil we ever get ever.
It's as English as it comes. It's like you could see the scaffolding from different periods all sort of mixed together.
Yeah. Okay, and we're headed back to the same route here.
Okie dokie.
So we might as well talk while we travel.
Where are we going? Eggnog?
Eggnog, yeah.
Yeah, Noglog.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
All right. So Alan and Sean want to join us on the field trip, by the way.
Fun.
Yeah.
I'm excited. We'll have to think of something particularly devious for us to look at.
Yeah, that's true. We should plan something special.
Well, since they're crossing over at Rivendell, maybe Rivendell's the way to go.
Yeah, I know. Alan has played some, but I don't think Sean has. We're trying to get him to get a character through the intro area so he can join us.
Yeah.
But Alan already has a character on Landreval, so.
How can I be of service?
Which is where, by coincidence, we were already scheduled to be.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So we're working on this. So he's going to have like a level 5 character, I don't doubt. So somewhere safe would probably be good.
Okay, we'll ponder upon that, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's a shame the fall festival will be over by then, maybe.
I guess we could ask them where they would like to go, and
yeah, especially the first timer.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see. It's like the Doctor taking his companion through time and space and going, "Oh, this is just the Shire," and they're going, "It's the Shire."
Exactly. Yes, it is kind of like that. All right, let us head out to by Gondaman again, and then we'll go a little bit past. I want to go up to those treasure fields.
Yes, quite.
So, funny thing about the treasure fields. So, that was when I first started my account, and I was running Wigand around Bree. I was maybe level 10 or something like that. I was still doing some really basic Breeland quests. And the very first festival came up. And it was the treasure fields thing, the treasure hunt.
Oh, yeah. Then you're spirited away out there, weren't you?
Yes, I had no idea, like, what would happen, right? So I'm like, oh, like a quest. Like, I always accept quests. Like, I'm keen to do every quest there is. So I clicked accept, and then, like, boom, I'm out there. And I was like, like, where am I? I mean, I didn't even try to do anything on the treasure hunt. I was just like so panicked. I'm like, run away, right? I'm like, and so I just like, fortunately, I had just figured out how to do milestones. So, I did in fact head out, just like get back to like the Prancing Pony, and I was like, phew, oh boy, that was a close one. And I felt totally betrayed. That was the second time it happened to me. The first time, of course, that I got transported away was by Gandalf to Rivendell.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's terrifying.
Which I was also totally not expecting, and was really mad because I'm like, I wanted to get there in order, like, in the plot.
Plus, if you're out there in low level, you can't take a horse back.
Yes, I know. Like, I couldn't get back. Anyway, yeah. So I was deeply troubled by that.
Why have you betrayed me, Gandalf.
Yeah, that was hard. But then when the treasure hunt thing came up, like that was just, it was the first time one just kind of popped up onto my screen and transported me to a random place. So yeah,
Wizardry.
yeah, it was weird. But anyway, because of that, because I got so panicked and never completed it, and indeed I've never done it at all ever since then. I never even knew where that was. Like, I never even knew that was actually like a legitimate place on the map. Because again, I was starting a human character from the Breelands, so I'd never been anywhere near Eärendil. So I was just like in this strange map in this strange country I'd never been to, and I vanished out of it as quickly as I could. And of course, the quests didn't take me to it. Like, I never went to either the Shire or Eärendil for a really long time. Because I was just like following the quests up into the North Downs, and cheerfully, there I went, and only later on came to explore the other places. But yeah, I only discovered that like you can just travel to where that treasure hunt place is on the map, like very recently, like within the last year or so.
Well, for the longest time I thought it was a contained place. It didn't like extend out of there until I ran off the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh wait, I know where this is. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we're coming up here.
Here we are. All right.
Yep.
So this road, is this the road that goes up to it?
I believe so.
Okay.
I'm prepared to be wrong.
All right. Let's head up this way then.
It's got this little switchback approach. It's very similar to where the elves were camped out, Thornad.
Right.
Just the approach and everything.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because we haven't seen much of this. Because this is the Dwarf Road, which has been very consistent. Even the one that goes up to Thrassy's Lodge was consistent. But on the flat stretch down there, the path kind of petered out for a while.
Yep.
Which it normally hadn't done, because we concluded that this road was made by Thorin's people. And indeed, we immediately see columns that are clearly Longbeardian.
Yep. And also the blue stone on the outside indicates.
Yeah. See, for a second from the other side, I thought that this was a broken, sort of ruinous column, but it is not. That's a feature. That's not a break.
It's a feature, not a bug.
That's right. That is a very interestingly designed pillar, and we've not seen these anywhere else.
We've seen very few short pillars that were done that way on purpose.
Yeah. And then we get the banners with, right? Oh, like the same thing, but a tall bit on the top. Okay. And then a squat, what is this, a tower? Too short to be a tower, too big to be a crenellation? What is this thing? Water tower? No idea.
I'm going to say it's structurally important.
Okay. And pillars overlooking... Okay, we got overlooking the road.
Remember, there are dwarves involved, so chances are there's a lot more beneath the surface that we haven't seen yet.
True. I mean, right. There's no reason to suspect that the main door is going to be from the outside.
Yeah. It could be support to keep the cliff face from collapsing.
Right. And Bricktails, you are correct about that. There is no Mythgard Academy tomorrow because we're between books right now, and there is no exploring. There is nothing next week. I'm going to be away all week next week. I'm going to be on a little retreat with my wife next week. Very exciting.
Yay!
A week without the kids in Hawaii.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jackpot, man.
Jackpot, indeed.
And I was pleased. I got I got 2 days of vacation this last weekend, first time away from the kids.
Yeah. No, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, you do find yourself going, oh, so and so would love this. Oh, so and so would think that was so funny the whole time. And then you go, stop. We're not doing that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, just being selfish.
No. Yep. These columns are really intricate. I don't think I've seen them this
They
decorative.
are. No,
before.
we've not seen anything like this kind of decorative column. And we've got the short ones and the tall ones, right? That go around. And then we've just got this, like, sort of wall thing, right? Which...
There's a diamond pattern, there's a knotwork pattern, there's these arches on here, these sort of arabesque-looking arches at the bottom.
Right, is that...
Somebody... This is an...
What am I looking at? Is that Sarnur? No, that's not.
No.
Yes, it is. I am looking at Sarnur across the way there. Up on the hills.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the gate we couldn't get through, isn't it?
Looks
like it.
Yeah, the bricked up one, I think,
Yeah,
right?
the bricked up gate.
How you get up there?
Yeah. Oh, how to get up here? I jumped
Yeah.
over from the other thing.
These canopies.
I climbed up over on the other side and then I jumped across the corner.
Other side. Okay. Yep,
Yeah.
no, I see it.
So this is something fairly consistent that we've seen. That is the wall. Like many people would have, you know, a wall of some kind here and not just a flat open space with a drop.
Yeah.
I mean, like you'd normally expect like a wall with crenellations, you know, something to stand behind and shoot at if like somebody were attacking you. I mean, this is a beautiful view down the valley to the approach to this place. You know, which makes you think this would be pretty defensible, but there's no wall here. But again, we've seen that very consistently. We saw that all around Gondaman. We saw that in all of the Longbeardian stuff up at Sarnur. Yeah, and no railings, of course, Druid's Fire. You're absolutely correct. They're not...
OSHA violation.
Yeah, they're not worried about that. But...
I think we've established not only in the classes available, but just from the buildings that this is not a group of people who would be like firing bows or something, someplace where they'd need to hunker down behind something. Chances are they had a machine to do that, or like maybe kettles, or some sort of device to prop up here.
Right. Or again, just that, like, as you were suggesting before, like, we're thinking about it from the wrong orientation, right? We're thinking about it from a surface dwelling orientation, right? I mean, we're thinking about what humans would build in fortifications up in a spot like this, which would be a place to live above ground with walls that would go up to protect it, right? But when you look at this, this is just a platform with nothing. Like, there's literally nothing. It's not even a building unless those corner tower things are buildings, which they don't look like. Like, there's nothing here. Not only is there no wall here to defend, but, like, why would they need to defend it? Like, they don't care to defend it. This would prevent anybody from climbing up, right? If anyone did manage to scale the stone up to here, then this, like, really smooth wall would be a challenge, right? For them to carry on scaling up. But still, like, at the end of the day, so what if somebody comes up here? What happens then? There's nothing here. Yeah, there's nothing here. So the dwarves, like, would be presumably below the ground. Like, where they would be living would be less accessible. And we certainly saw that throughout Sarnur, right? Sarnur was like a city that had no, like, city there, right? Most of the places. And no doors to enter into. But again, that's...
That we could see.
That we could see, exactly. So presumably there's more of that kind of thing. Now, once again, here the road just totally vanished.
Yep.
Totally vanished. No, there's a little vestige of road. So we've got these.
There's not a lot of traffic here.
Right. So that the dwarf road has become overgrown, but we have these gorgeous columns. Again, much more detailed, much more labor intensive, honestly, in the design and execution of those columns than the columns that we saw, say, down in Eärendil, right?
And that's what you do in an area where the road gets overgrown or snowed over or something like that. You have those columns to help guide you.
Sure. Oh, what on earth is this?
What on earth?
An even more random set of columns with other platforms. With nothing but a couple more columns with a banner on. Huh. Huh.
It is a place to do things, but what things?
Yes, what things, and in what way does this place facilitate the doing of them? Yeah, it's a little unclear. It really is.
See, this is how rumors get started. The dwarves are secretive.
Right. Now, it's a nice symmetrical pattern.
Uh-huh.
The 8... the 8 columns.
It's a platform, or is it a
And
roof?
the 3. Is this symbolic in some way? I mean, is it like structurally symbolic? I don't see it. I can't
Is
get
it
up
missing
any
some
higher.
sort of furniture that's not there? Like stairs?
Or doors?
Or doors? Altar?
It does, like, with the way that it's kind of sheltered in this little hollow,
Mm-hmm.
and with the kind of pathway that it forms, it does feel like if there were an altar at the end of this, it would hardly be surprising, right? And goodness knows we've seen plenty of altars. True, often goblin altars or whatever, but yeah, I don't know.
Some sort of platform or dais to give speeches on or something? Like this is a pulpit?
That's an interesting idea. I mean, this could have been a kind of courtyard, though it looks like just a road. I say it looks like a courtyard, except it doesn't look like a courtyard, because there were clearly no paving stones over here.
Or other buildings. So that would imply it's a doorway of some kind.
Maybe.
Like it's a house you're reading up to. Maybe there's digging here because it was buried.
I don't know. We notice another thing that we've not seen anywhere around here is any evidence of anything dour handy. Right?
Yeah, that's true. This
has been
aggressively
just
Longbeardian.
Yes, Longbeardian all the time. Let's keep going.
I'd hazard to say it's newish too, because it has a lot more detail and artwork than some of the Longbeard stuff we've seen. Is this from a time longer ago when they had more time to work on stuff, or is this more recent?
Yeah. I don't know. This wooden stuff doesn't look very recent.
No, this is scaffolding they put up to do the treasure hunting with.
Pretty weathered, though.
It wouldn't take long in this cold, I think, but...
Yeah, I guess a lot of that is meant to be frost, right?
A rhyme.
What's the red?
Rust?
The red.
Metal.
On the
Oh,
edges.
the red.
There's this...
Uh,
is it a crown? Looks like a crown.
Could be, like a maker stamp or something? I think
There's-
it's supposed to be the type of wood.
No.
looks like
No, there's definitely a painted insignia. You can see the 2 lines on either side, and there's a repeated, almost like a
Yes.
stencil or something. It looks like either a crown or maybe a red bird, like a hawk.
Flames?
Could be flames. Potentially could be flames.
It's the stamp of the lumberyard, I guess.
See, and you can
Maybe
see
it's
it on the
supposed to be
upright posts here.
Maybe it glows in the dark so you don't fall in.
Oh, right. It's like track lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Landing lights.
Yeah.
Wouldn't put it past him to have invented something like that. Or maybe it's some sort of treatment to the wood so it doesn't rot. Like how, modern day wood constructions have compression and chemicals added to the wood to keep it fresher longer.
I don't know. I think it's definitely a design. But here's the challenging thing. All right. Here's the thing I'm trying to figure out. Is it the same?
Looks like.
Okay,
Although
so like
it might be reversed from one to the other.
there's 5 of them. It's repeated. The design is repeated 5 times on this pillar here.
Uh-huh.
But it doesn't look... I mean, of course, the frost pattern overlaying it is different in each place and obscuring different parts of the image, so it makes it very difficult to tell. But I'm trying to figure out... Because it doesn't look like it's exactly the same. Maybe it is.
Yeah, it's hard to tell with all the frost and rime in front of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a design.
Yeah.
And what insignia could that be?
Well, let's assume it was a lumberyard's mark. What would it be technically using for delineating?
I don't know. I mean, it looks like it was painted or engraved on here.
Most likely a stencil. If the theory is that it's the same image, it would most likely be a stamp or a stencil.
Yeah, very possibly. Okay. What if this was the Dour Hands?
Uh-huh.
The wood is made by the Dour Hands.
No, I know what it is.
What is it?
I know what it is. Notice what kind of wood has the stamps on it. Their
the
support.
Square posts, yes.
Their support.
Uh-huh.
The markings are to delineate that these are wood that's supposed to be used in a specific way, as opposed to the
Okay.
wood planks that are being put across them.
Right, and those are plain.
Uh-huh.
Even the crossbeams down below have them.
Uh-huh. All support. So maybe they were put in first, and then the other put in second. It's like IKEA. They got markings on them
Okay.
to indicate.
It's like IKEA.
Well, it makes sense. You know,
gotcha.
Forged by that
I gotcha.
Longbeard dwarf IKEA. You know.
Okay. I think they're dour handy. I think that this... Because I know that wood doesn't take all that long to weather when contrasted with stone, but a lot of the wood we've seen around here, I mean, like in Sarnur, for instance, seems to last pretty well.
But we've never seen anything like this on them.
No, not necessarily. So I'm going to be keen to see anything else like it as we go forward. Is there anything else up here?
Yeah, there's a dwarf keeping guard. I can't remember if there's any doors into the hillside up here. I can't remember.
Because we haven't found a point of ingress. If
No, it was a column. It was a column. Yeah, I couldn't remember if there was a door anywhere. It doesn't seem to be.
all right, there's a column down there. Oh, yeah, and there's one over here too, just like the one at the center of that, whatever it is. And this is the same one that we looked at before, the one that kind of looks like a hammer.
Uh-huh.
We saw it in Gondaman.
Yep. That's the one.
Yeah. Okay. So I was saying that we hadn't found any dour handy ruins
Yeah.
up here. And we haven't found anything in stone. But if that wooden scaffolding was left by them...
Yeah, I'd have to see. I know there's some scaffolding and construction work going on at Thorn's Hall. We'll have to compare.
I agree. And hopefully we can find some without frost on.
Well, we're going north from here. I doubt it, but...
Well, if we can find some inside, is what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's head down. Oh, I totally thought that deer was chasing you two, by the way. Harneth, I thought that deer totally was after you. It's possible that it could be recentish dour handy excavation of an older site. Rakentia, that does seem possible.
But all the treasure hunters up here are Longbeards.
Yes, and all of the...
Oh, you can't fall down. You're going to fall down.
Yes, I am. That's okay. Gently. I fell down gently.
Floated like a wee brick.
Oh.
It's a shame the dwarves aren't here and we can't talk to them about the area.
Hey, what's this? Did I see this? I didn't even see this. What is this?
See
thing?
what?
This.
Wait, I have to go to an area where I haven't fallen down.
Yeah, see, look, yeah, I accidentally fell off the cliff and
You learn all sorts of things when you plummet.
got to this place with a door with a handle.
What?
I don't remember seeing that door before.
Door with a handle?
Yeah, it's totally got a handle. And not only does it have a handle, it's like human height handle.
Huh.
Any short
Trying to
people
figure out
can
where you
go, like any hobbits or dwarves stand next to that thing. Yeah, it's like shoulder length. The hobbit have to reach up to at head height or above to get that handle. Yeah. Thank you, Avalarda. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this right here.
Hey, yeah, you found me. See, if you just slid off the cliff, you know, like civilized people.
So I wonder if this is the entrance then, because it is a big door in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that door, I don't recall seeing that door with the perfect little Celtic knot right in the middle. I don't remember seeing that.
We've only seen doors for the Dower Hand room.
Yeah, we saw 2 different kinds of dour handy doors.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's obviously a long beardish construction, this.
Yes.
Are these meant to be windows? Is that possibly like translucent stone or something?
Oh, like some kind of mica?
Yeah. Because, I mean, like, flanking the doors, it looks like it here, right? These look like windows.
See, now I want to look inside a dwarf home and see if they actually show it. Yeah, I think that's entirely feasible.
Yeah,
Not sure you'd be able to see well through it, but it'd let light in.
It has a door and it has windows. Yeah, you wouldn't really be able to see through it. It would just be translucent if it were something like mica. But so this just looks like a big house.
Yep.
Just, like a nice little suburban just outside of Gondomar.
Probably closer to a gatehouse.
Maybe. And how close to Gondomar is it?
No, I don't think it's for Gondomar. I think it's for the stuff on the hill, but I think it's for the treasure hunting site.
For the treasure hunting site. Maybe.
It's much closer.
Then
Maybe
Gondomar?
they're all connected.
Yeah. Right.
I wonder how close these are to the elven ruins that were once here.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, looking at my map. Yeah, they're a little further away than Gondomar is.
That's true.
And of course, Gondomar used to be Elvish too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking about how Gondomar was once Elvish, if anything out here was.
Right. But then again, I don't know. I mean, this construction is pretty new from clearly when the Longbeards took over the place, including, Elvish Gondomar, and rebuilt it, leaving not a scrap of evidence of Elvish architecture anywhere.
Maybe this was the entry point.
Maybe so. Maybe so. All right. Well, I'm tempted to go on to eggnog, but I feel like I probably shouldn't because it's late.
Yeah.
And I should let people go. All right. But that was fun up in the treasure fields today, and we'll have to look. I'm keen to solve the mystery of those red stamps on those. Well, I say mystery. I want to see them more clearly so I can see what they're supposed to be, fire or a bird or what. But anyway.
And if they appear anywhere else.
Exactly. And if they appear anywhere else. And if we can find out if they're dour, handy, or longbeardish. So anyway, so thanks everybody for joining me today. So remember, no class next week, but we'll be back on the 5th with our special guests.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
Looking
everybody.
forward to it.
Very good.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thanks for joining me on this epic exploration of The Lord of the Rings and of Standing Stone's video adaptation of Tolkien's story. If you are having even half the fun I'm having on this journey, I hope you will consider supporting the project by donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.